See, so much contamination, ignorance in this dull brain. Ignorance, so much ignorance, contamination in this material world. So, we try the best we can with the contaminated state that we're in to be Krishna conscious. Yeah, so ultimately, where does this transcendental knowledge comes from? It comes from the supreme pure. Krishna comes from the purest. So obviously, whatever Krishna speaks is going to be pure because he's pure. So the transcendental knowledge is pure because it's coming from the purest person. Knowledge is coming from a person. Knowledge is not coming from a rock. Knowledge is coming from a conscious being is distributing knowledge when they speak. When they speak, the words this is the knowledge is coming from a person, a conscious person. So you want to get the knowledge from the purest source. You don't want to get the knowledge from an ignorant person. That's going to make you go even more worse. You want to get your knowledge from someone that's perfect. So Vedic knowledge is completely perfect without any defects because it's coming from God. And it's coming down through the succession of spiritual teachers that don't change God's words. Like Prabhupada said, Bhagavad Gita as it is. This is Bhagavad means God, Gita means song or words, and as it is. He didn't change anything. So it's still pure. You don't change God's words. So this is transcendental knowledge. It's coming from God, from the spiritual world down to us in the material world. It's completely pure. And it's free from all the material defects of a conditioned soul. So a conditioned soul has 4 defects which make us useless to produce knowledge. Because you remember, Bhakti Mala, do you know what the 4 defects are? This was at the very beginning of our soul-searching sessions. We talked about these things.
Imperfect senses.
Yeah, very good. Imperfect senses. Every conditioned soul has imperfect senses.
Cheating, we can cheat.
Yeah, we have a cheating propensity. We make mistakes. Like me, I didn't record, so we made a mistake. And we are subject to illusion. These are the 4 defects of every conditioned soul, and that disqualifies us for producing knowledge. Knowledge from a conditioned soul is no good because of these 4 defects. Therefore, if we're intelligent, we should get our knowledge from the Vedas, because the Vedas doesn't have any of these 4 defects. There's no mistakes in the Vedas. There's no cheating in the Vedas. There's no illusion in the Vedas. And there's no imperfect senses. This is coming from God down through his pure devotees that don't change his words. So this transcendental knowledge is pure. Does that make sense?
Of course.
So then the interesting thing is, well, then why am I speaking? Because I'm a conditioned soul. But the thing is, that's the thing. Even though I'm imperfect, yes, I make mistakes, and I have imperfect senses, and so forth. But what I'm trying to do is just repeat the words of Krishna as it is, and of the spiritual master. So although I'm not perfect, I'm imperfect, but the words that I speak are perfect. As long as I remain chaste to this disciplic succession, parampara. Does that make sense? I'm not perfect, I'm imperfect. But as long as whatever I speak is speaking the words of Krishna, the instructions of Krishna and of the spiritual master, without changing it, then the words I speak are perfect. Does that make sense? But if I change those words, interpret them, then the words are also imperfect. So my perfection is not changing the words of Krishna. Of course, we may explain the words of Krishna in a way that makes it more understandable for the audience. So sometimes we may give some analogies, some of our own personal experience, or whatever like that, to help make Krishna's words more easily digestible for the people. But basically, we don't change the essence of the words. The packaging of the words, of course, like now we're packaging them in English. I mean, Krishna didn't originally speak them in English, he spoke them in Sanskrit. So, but the meaning, the essence is the same, although we're saying it in a different language, but the essence of it is the same. The meaning is the same. Just like medicine, right? Medicine has an active principle. That's the thing that actually makes you better. And then it has a packaging. Every medicine has a packaging. And often the packaging they'll make it sweet, so then it makes you want to eat it, because normally the active principle of the medicine is bitter. So if you just take that by itself, no one's going to eat medicine because it's going to taste bitter as hell. So they usually put a nice packaging on the outside. So like that, the transcendental knowledge is the active principle. It's what works. And the way we present it with some nice packaging or whatever to make it more interesting and attractive and understandable for the people. So you can change the packaging, no problem, but don't change the active principle. Like, for example, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we are his eternal servant. But I could say, I can change the packaging of that. But if I change the actual essence of it and say that Krishna is not God, that someone else is God, or that we're all God, or if you do this, chant this mantra for 6 months, then you'll realize that you're God. And I could say that, that you're if you take to spiritual life, you'll become completely independent, completely free. You won't have to serve anyone anymore. So like that, I can just change the knowledge, change the essence. But then it's not pure anymore. It's not pure anymore. So does that make sense?
Changes it too dramatically.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, that when there's ever the game of rumors, where somebody will whisper in somebody else's ear, and then the message is totally different from the beginning.
It's just totally different.
It's just lost. It's just lost
it's
completely.
Lost. Yeah. In the beginning of the 4th chapter, Krishna explains that the knowledge, the transcendental knowledge, had become lost. So therefore, Krishna is saying that he's speaking it again to Arjuna to start it up again. Because originally he spoke it millions of years ago to the sun god in the 4th chapter, text 2. That he spoke it many millions of years ago to the sun god. And now he's speaking the same knowledge that he taught the sun god. He's speaking the same knowledge to Arjuna. But what happened is, in that gap of millions of years, the knowledge had become lost. The disciplic succession had been broken. The disciplic succession had been broken. So he's coming to start a new disciplic succession with Arjuna, like that. So that just happens over time, and Krishna says that over time, knowledge does become lost. Even since Krishna came 5,000 years ago, the knowledge had become almost lost. And then it was revived again when Krishna came again as Lord Chaitanya 500 years ago. And then it almost became lost after Lord Chaitanya also. Only one or two people were keeping the pure knowledge alive. It was Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the father of Prabhupada's guru, revived it. It almost become lost. There's so many crooks and cheaters professing that they were the real thing and they were the real bhakti yogis, but they were crooks and cheaters and all kind of debauchees and really low class people presenting themselves as devotees of Krishna and devotees of Lord Chaitanya, but they were just cheaters. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur revived it, and further revived by Prabhupada's Guru Bhaktisiddhanta, and then Prabhupada spread it all over the world. But it almost become lost. So we have to try to be very chaste to our spiritual master, and present the transcendental knowledge purely, without any mental speculation and without our own material motivations. What stuffs it up? What stuffs up the transcendental knowledge is if we speculate. And so the mind has that tendency. Call it a fertile brain, monkey mind. We have that tendency to speculate, mental speculation. If anyone starts off talking and they start off saying, I think, maybe it's like this, could be, immediately Prabhupada said, if anyone talks like that, rascal, they're a rascal. Anyone that says, I think, maybe it's like this, it could be like this, I believe. You never hear anywhere Prabhupada says, I think, or I believe, or maybe, could be. And also our material selfish motives stuff it up. We want to get something out of it. We'll publish a book called Bhagavad Gita, which is very famous. So a lot of people are going to buy it if you write the title Bhagavad Gita on it. But you fill it up with your own ideas, with your own agenda. You have your own personal agenda that you want to promote your own personal agenda. But yeah, then you want to present your own personal agenda, then don't call it Bhagavad Gita. Call it under your name. Don't use Krishna's name. Prabhupada said there's like 1,000 different Bhagavad Gitas. And each one of them has completely different ideas. Because each author is trying to put forward their own motivations, their own agendas. But they're not presenting Krishna's agenda. Which is explained in the last chapter of Bhagavad Gita. That just surrender. That's surrender to me. And I'll deliver you from all your sinful reactions, and don't fear. Like that. And Krishna says just prior to that verse about surrender, always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, and offer your obeisances to me, offer your respect to me. And thus I promise that you will come to me. So that is Krishna's agenda. But so many of these authors, they never even mention that. So many Bhagavad Gitas, they don't even say that Krishna's God. They don't even say. Did you notice the verses, right? Many of the verses say Bhagavan Uvacha. You remember that? You remember reading in many of the verses, it says Bhagavan Uvacha. Have you noticed that before? Bhagavan means God, and Uvacha means said. God said. Why doesn't it? Did you ever read in here it says Krishna Uvacha? Krishna said. I mean, it is Krishna speaking, but why doesn't it say Krishna said? Why does it say God said? You ever thought about that? Why doesn't it say Krishna said? Because it is Krishna speaking. But why does it say God said? So you know that's God that's saying it, that Krishna's God. So that you know that Krishna's God. That's God's. It's not just some guy named Krishna speaking.
Yes.
It's not just some blue guy named Krishna speaking. This is God speaking.
Yes, of course.
But so many of these rascal versions, they're not even acknowledging that Krishna's God. Oh, Krishna's a prince. Krishna's a coward boy. Not even acknowledging that Krishna's God. But then, of course, it's not pure. So, but it can be pure as long as we follow these principles. And it's saying that this transcendental knowledge, this is the fruit, that's the result of our spiritual practices. What's the result? What's the goal we want to get out of our spiritual practices? Whatever our yoga process we're following, whatever sacrifice processes we're following, what's the goal? What's the result? What's the fruit? And it's saying here, the fruit, this is the fruit, is to have this knowledge. This is the fruit of whatever our austerities we're doing, sacrifices we're doing, yoga processes we're following. This is the fruit to get this knowledge. This is what's going to set us free from the material world. So if you find that through the processes you're following that you're getting more knowledge, then that's a good sign that you're getting more transcendental knowledge. This is the fruit that we want. If after so many years of following a process and you're remaining ignorant and you don't understand who you are, you don't understand who God is, you don't understand your relationship with God, then that process is not very good.
Isn't the relationship and our developing love for God more important though than having knowledge of these?
That's a good point, yeah. I mean, in the spiritual world, knowledge is not important at all. The common denominator in the spiritual world is everyone loves Krishna. In the spiritual world, the devotees don't even know that Krishna's God. Right? In the spiritual world, the devotees don't even know that Krishna's God. They just think, like Krishna's parents, right? That Krishna's my son, and they just love him so much. Or Krishna's my friend. Or Krishna's my lover. They're not thinking Krishna's God. They're already on the spontaneous platform, pure love for God. So the knowledge is not important there. They're living the perfection of that knowledge. See, what is the knowledge meant for? The knowledge is meant to bring you to the point of completely surrendering yourself to Krishna, completely devoting yourself to Krishna. But they've achieved that point. They're completely surrendered to Krishna. Like Prabhupada said, everything for Krishna, nothing for me. They live that there. That's their life, their breath, everything is dedicated to Krishna. Their body, their mind, their words, everything is Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. But in the material world, we're so ignorant and covered by illusion, so that has to be dealt with, that ignorance and illusion. So therefore we need this transcendental knowledge. But once you've achieve the transcendental knowledge, and as a result of that, you surrender to Krishna and become a pure devotee of Krishna, then at that point, then the knowledge is not so necessary anymore, and you just engaging in devotional service. So in the spiritual world, there's no one reading Bhagavad Gita there. No one's reading Bhagavad Gita in the spiritual world. Oh, do you remember that verse? Do you remember the verse? 438? What's 438? There's no one doing that. But they're living it there. They're living it, that life of complete devotion and surrender. Here in the material world, we're talking about it and we're trying to encourage ourselves and others to do it and all these kind of things. So they're doing it. There's no book that you're reading the spiritual world saying, I should chant 16 rounds, follow the 4 regulator principles. They're chanting day and night. They don't need a guru or a book to tell you to chant 16 rounds. They're chanting day and night. When Mother Yashoda's cleaning the floor of Krishna's house, she's singing. Yasomati Nandana Brajobaro Nagara Gokula Ranjana Kana. She's singing the glories of Krishna. She's always chanting. She's always chanting, just spontaneously like that. She doesn't have a library of books. But for us, to get us out of ignorance, we need this knowledge. Is very essential because we're in complete forgetfulness of Krishna. But that was a very good point to bring up. Yeah. But in the material world, this knowledge is very essential. And then when we have complete knowledge, and at that time of having complete knowledge, when we completely surrender everything that we have to Krishna and love him and be devoted to him, then at that point the cultivating of knowledge is not important anymore. It'll just be your cultivating devotional service, and you'll always be hearing about Krishna and talking about Krishna and remembering Krishna and worshipping Krishna. The 9 processes of devotional service, like that. So you'll always be engaged in these different activities. If we don't cultivate this knowledge now and artificially think we love God, what will happen is that we'll just revert back to ignorance again. One time, actually, it was interesting. Prabhupada was giving classes every morning and evening in a temple he was in. He noticed one of his female disciples didn't come about 3 nights in a row. She didn't come, or she came late. And the third night, he actually stopped the class, and there's like 100 people there in the room. And he stopped the class and he addressed her personally and said, "Why are you not coming to the classes?" And she said, "I'm buying bhoga for the deities," which is a good excuse. Buying bhoga, that means buying rice and
food
sugar
stuff. Yeah,
foodstuffs for the deities. And he asked her a question: what is the difference between you and all the other people in the market? What's the difference? What's the difference between that lady and everyone else that's also going to buy bhoga?
she wasn't buying for herself. She wasn't buying food for herself.
Very good.
She was buying food for Krishna.
Yep. But what's gonna make you remember that you're not buying it for yourself, that you're buying it for Krishna?
Because of that relationship and that knowledge.
Yeah. The knowledge. Yeah. Because you're getting knowledge that's reminding you that this is not for me. This is for Krishna.
Mm.
Every day that you're getting that knowledge, this is not for me. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for Krishna. And then the next day, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for Krishna. And then if you stop that process of hearing this knowledge, what's going to happen? Eventually, one day you're going to think, I should get this for me. Why I'm doing everything for Krishna? What am I getting out of it? What am I getting out? Well, I'm working so hard for Krishna and nothing for me. What am I getting out of it? I should do it for me.
Oopsie.
Eventually what's going to happen is the ignorance is going to cover us over again. So Prabhupada pointed that out, a very clear example there. We need to keep hearing this knowledge again and again and again, because the atmosphere of the material world is not enlightenment. The atmosphere of the material world is ignorance. Like now, here in New Zealand, it's starting to get dark. That's why I had to turn the light on. Because darkness is always coming in. There's always darkness coming in. It means always ignorance. The nature of this material is ignorance. Now we're remembering that we're Krishna's God and we're his servant because we've been hearing it. But if you stop the hearing process and you stop hearing the knowledge from Krishna, from the Guru, then eventually what's going to happen is that ignorance, which is all around us, it's inside of us and outside of us, is going to cover over our knowledge again.
Yes.
There's even persons that were devotees and that they've stopped acting in devotional service and gone back to what they were pretty much doing before they came to Krishna consciousness. How is that possible? It's very easily possible. Because they stopped getting this transcendental knowledge. And they went back basically the same modes of nature, same conditioning they were before they joined. Devotee would never think, I'm going to go back to meat eating and intoxication, but they do. They do. That's the power of Maya, the power of illusion. If we want to stay free from Maya's free from illusion, we need to keep immunizing ourselves from this material infection of ignorance by this process of hearing transcendental knowledge. This is our immunity. Like people want to get immunized from coronavirus, they're madly trying to get some what do you call it? Immunizing thing, and then to protect you from the thing. So this is what even more worse than coronavirus and every other virus, infection and disease and everything, is this disease of ignorance. This is the worst disease of ignorance, of illusion. And the only thing that's going to protect us from this disease of ignorance is transcendental knowledge. Transcendental knowledge.
It's beautiful. The disease of ignorance.
And that's every part of our life. This process is protecting us so much we don't realize. One time devotees went to take Prabhupada out of Bombay because it was very hot there. So they took to a hill station where it's nice and cool. At some pious Indian family had invited them to come there. So for his health, he went there with the devotees, and then they had dinner with these people, and they had like a lazy Susan. Do you know what a lazy Susan is? Yeah, it's a wheel, a revolving wheel in the middle of the table with all the preparations, all the food and bowls there, and if whatever you want, you just spin it around and help yourself and take some. And so they ate together with the devotees, ate together with the hosts, the family, And the next morning, Prabhupada was, as he every morning, the same process, getting up in the middle of the night and writing the books, dictating the books. And he called out to his servant at the time of the early morning prayers, Mangalarti, and he called out to the servant. He said, do you hear that? Do you hear that? And the servant all he could hear was the devotees snoring in the next room. So Prabhupada said, the disciple said, I think it's the devotees snoring. And Prabhupada said, I know it's the devotees snoring. Wake them up immediately. Wake them up. And he said, call them into the room. So they all came into the room. They'd just been woken up, came and offered obeisances to Prabhupada and said that we've only been here one day and already you're sleeping in past the Mangalarti. If we stay here one more day, you are all going to fall down. And all the devotees were shocked. And go and get dressed and pack your bags. We're going immediately. And tell the host that my spiritual master is not feeling well. We have to return to Bombay immediately.
Wow.
And then Prabhupada, he spoke to them and gave some more detail about what could have been the cause of them all sleeping in. He said, you see what happened last night when we were eating, how we were spinning the food around and everyone was helping themselves. So he said the food was contaminated. Because the food you ate, contaminated food, that's why you couldn't get up in the morning. That's why we have it that before you help yourself to the food, you have to, at the temple like that, before you help yourself, you have to wash your hands. Because if someone's eating and then they touch that spoon and help themselves, and then you come later on and touch that spoon, then you're actually taken on their consciousness. The food you eat is you becoming affected by their consciousness. And that's why we have it that a person that's not eating, that's clean, serves the food. So then you're not going to get contaminated. But if someone's eating, touches the food, and then you touch the food, then you take on some of their consciousness and some of their sinful reactions.
I didn't know that.
No.
That's why I'm telling you. That's why I'm telling you.
It's important. It's very important.
Yes, I always was thought it was to do with cleanliness. I didn't know it was to do
Well,
with
it is there too. Hygiene, of course, is there. Just like material diseases can be transmitted through not hygienic conditions, but the consciousness of the person becomes transmitted through unclean conditions.
Wow.
Not just the material bugs, but your own karma. You transferring your karma to someone through that unclean condition. That's why I said, we don't want to eat cooked food from non-devotees. Because their consciousness comes through that food. So you're not just eating the bread, you just think you're eating flour and water and sugar and salt, but you're actually taking on also that person's karma, especially grains, especially cooked grains. The karma is stored, especially in the grains. Less is transferred through milk, and less through fruits, and less through water, but more is through grains like dals and grains. The karma is transferred. Sometimes Prabhupada would go to a person's house. He would eat everything because he could tell they were pious people, good people. Sometimes he would go to someone's house. He would only have milk or fruits, nothing more than that, refused. He would only take fruits or milk. Sometimes he would go to someone's house, he would only take water. Sometimes he would go to someone's house, he wouldn't even take water because he could tell these people are so sinful. These people are so sinful, I don't want to even take water from them. So like that, we have to be very careful, because otherwise our consciousness, and that's the thing we want to protect. We want to protect our consciousness. Even if this body dies of cancer or whatever, who cares? We're going to get another one. But don't risk losing your Krishna consciousness. Don't risk getting covered over by ignorance and lust and greed and so forth again. So you got to protect your consciousness. And in one way that can be affected is through this, the food scenario like that. So that's why all these rules are there. Think, this is a pain. You have to wash your hand every time before you get some food, and oh my God, what a pain. But it's for a reason. But that's why we make it easier that you don't have to wash your hands. You have someone that's not eating, that is clean, serves, and then when everyone is fed, then that person can eat. And then you're not getting to have to wash your hands 100 times and get up and down 100 times and so forth, like that. I mean, the best process, which is traditional process, everyone sits on the ground or whatever at a table, and then the servers bring the food to them. So you don't even have to get up. The servers bring the food, they're clean, they bring the food to the people, and you keep bringing them more and more until they're fully satisfied. When they're fully satisfied, they go wash their hands, and then the other people that served can sit down and they can serve them like that. That's the best. That's the best for health, for consciousness, like that. So that's why these things are there.
It's very important.
Of course, if it's just husband and wife or whatever together, I mean, you can help yourself. I mean, you're already tied up with their consciousness anyway. So, I don't want my wife's karma or my husband's karma. You already got it anyway, because you're married. You're already karmically tied up. So, but with strangers, with non-devotees, with the people you're living with. I mean, you can share the bowl or whatever like that with your family. Don't worry about that. But for devotees, you don't want to be, taking food from unclean non-devotees and getting their sinful reactions and so forth. And that'll affect like how can you get up in the morning, how good your chanting will be, what's your consciousness like. It'll affect all these little subtle things, affect the consciousness.
It's so important.
One time a devotee was looking at Time magazine in Mayapur. He was looking at Time magazine. Prabhupada said to him that just seeing the face of one of these materialists in this magazine enjoying sense gratification has destroyed all the good credits you have earned today from your bhakti. Just seeing their face. It's so contaminating, just looking at a sense enjoyer, looking at the face of a sense enjoyer, enjoying sense gratification. You see them, drinking beer or smoking a cigarette or eating some meat or whatever, or they're hugging and kissing each other or whatever. Just seeing them is so contaminating. So I bet you after that he didn't look at Time magazine for a while.
It's funny.
But we don't even think about it. I mean, who would have thought about that? What does it matter to look at some magazine? Who cares? But it affects your consciousness. And you lose so many the credits from good things that you do. You're counteracting, like that analogy of an elephant taking a bath. An elephant, the nature of an elephant, it'll go in the water, throw water over itself, and then when it comes out, what does it do?
Washes itself.
No, it washes itself. Then when it comes out, then it immediately throws dirt over itself again.
Oh, it does too. Yes.
What's the point?
Yeah.
It just immediately throws dirt over itself. So it's like that, you do some good thing, but then you did a bad thing, you know, and then you did a good thing, and then you did a bad thing. So then we wonder why I'm not progressing very much. Why we're not progressing very much? Because our wheels keep hitting the ground. You're taking off, and then you keep hitting the ground. So that's
all that you shared then. Sorry, Dr. Miller.
I won't be looking at magazines when I'm waiting in the shopping line anymore.
I
I look at the front of them. I won't be doing that.
was thinking that too. I'm like, no, I'm not
take a Back to Godhead magazine with you instead. Keep a Back to Godhead magazine.
That's very, that is what you know, all of what you share, but that demonstrates the depth of
Yeah, just small things, but it does add up. I mean, don't worry about every little thing. But if you know these things, they can help. Why not make life easier for ourselves? Why make it more difficult? It's already difficult, you know. So why make it more difficult? I mean, like one Back to Godhead magazine. I was at my guru's ashram. I mentioned this before. I just randomly opened up the book and I just started crying because of what did I see? I saw devotees dancing and chanting in ecstasy. They were so happy. Just immediately I saw them happy. I became so happy. I just started crying. So that's the effect both ways. If you look at something really spiritual, you can just become immediately transcendental. And if you look at something really materialistic, it can stuff you up, you know, in a really big way. You know, so it goes both ways, you know, so that's the thing, you know, we have to try to associate with as many things giving us some spiritual injection as we can, and try to avoid, you know, getting contaminated by all the, you know, excuse the word crap, you know, that's all around, you know. So and the material world is full of contamination. So, but a devotee learns the art of how not to get contaminated, even though living in the contaminated world, you know. And that's part of the reason why we're here in this remote place called Takahui in New Zealand. And it's just to create a ashram. Ashram means shelter. Beautiful word, ashram. It's a lovely word. Just say that. Ashram. Ashram. To create some sheltered environment around us of things that remind us of Krishna. Like every time they cock-a-doodle-doo. I remember how Rukmini hated the rooster and how Krishna got out of bed. You know, so you got to surround yourself with things that remind you of Krishna, and not surround yourself with things that are making you more lusty, greedy, angry, envious, ignorant, and so forth. You know, so that's the thing. Of course, you know, just to live this kind of life, you know, for my own benefit, that's selfish. It's a kind of spiritual selfishness. So that's not our ambition, but just to get things set up so that hopefully I'll become, you know, more pure in my Krishna consciousness, more enlivened and inspired and enthusiastic in my Krishna consciousness, and then from that sheltered environment, getting all my spiritual needs fulfilled, then I can go out and connect with the people that are contaminated and try to help uplift them. So that's what we want to try to find, that balance. We don't want to just live in our little pure bubble, and which is good for us but not good for anyone else, doesn't help anyone else, me living in Takahui, but then go out once we're spiritually strong, go out and try to help other people. But if we're not spiritually strong, how are you going to help anyone else? Isn't it? There's a saying that doctor, which Prabhupada quoted, doctor, first heal thyself. If the doctor is sick, how are you going to help any patient? You know, if the doctor gets coronavirus, how's he going to help all the other patients with coronavirus? First thing he has to do is make sure he doesn't get coronavirus, isn't it? So that's what we all have to spend some time to do that, to create an environment that's making us spiritually strong. Not only spiritually, but and that's coming in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 8th canto. So make sure you read Srimad Bhagavatam or you'll never get this story. 8th canto, that we have to be, Prabhupada says we are fighting a war against Maya. Prabhupada says we are fighting a war against Maya, against delusion. And in order to defeat Maya, we have to be physically strong, mentally strong, intellectually strong, spiritually strong. We have to be strong in all these areas, otherwise we're not going to be able to defeat Maya. So that's very important. And that story, that lesson comes in a story of an elephant fighting with a crocodile. Now, normally the elephant is going to be stronger than a crocodile, but in this case, the elephant was taking a bath in the water, and the crocodile grabbed on its leg and pulled it in the water more and kept it in the water. So, because the elephant was out of its natural environment, and the crocodile was in its natural environment, the crocodile was getting stronger and the elephant was getting weaker. And over time, the elephant got weaker and weaker and weaker. And then Prabhupada makes this point. Eventually what happened, the elephant realized he's going to lose. He's going to die. So actually that elephant had actually been a devotee in his previous life named King Indradyumna. And Krishna was so kind that because he was a devotee before, Krishna gave him memory of Krishna consciousness, even though he's in the body of an elephant. Most elephants are not Krishna conscious. This is a very special case. So he remembered some prayers to the Lord from his previous life, and he picked up a lotus flower out from the water. He picked up a lotus flower in his trunk, and he offered this lotus and the prayer to Lord Vishnu. And Lord Vishnu immediately came on the back of Garuda, and with his Sudarshan disc, he chopped the head off the crocodile and saved the elephant like that. But so many wonderful lessons there in that story. So one is that we have to keep strong physically, mentally, intellectually, spiritually. We have to keep strong in order to fight Maya. And then you fight Maya.
Thank you. Prabhu, Abhay, I have to go. I'm sorry, I have to go and get some things from town. But thank you so much.
I've already gone well over time as usual.
No, it's beautiful.
So just in your own time, check out the purport. It's only a short purport. We didn't really read it, but it's basically we've talked about some of the things there. But yeah, and it said there that if you have this transcendental knowledge, you don't have to search for peace. You have this transcendental knowledge, the peace will be within you. That's good, isn't it? You'll be enjoying peace within yourself as long as you have this knowledge. You'll enjoy peace. You won't have to travel the world searching for peace. The peace will be within your heart all the time. You'll be always enjoying supreme peace. So let the peace be with you. May the peace be with you. Not the force, but the peace. So lovely to see you both again.
Lovely to see you too. Thank you. Lovely to see you both. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
See you next time.
Yes.